find out who really has been dominating the SEC over the past 40 years. Yeah, I really did it. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? It's me again, Go to Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do videos every single day. So you hear it from all fan bases. Man, we've been great for the past, 40 years, 25 years. We dominated the 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010s, whatever. So I went back and did some digging. Who really ruled the past 40 years? Because if you think about it, I think that's when the modern product that we see started evolving into what we see. From the new stadiums being built or expansions, the equipment that they wear, the padding, the helmets, all that stuff started to look more like it does today. So that's why I went back 40 years to show you from top to bottom who the best team in the SEC has been. We will start at the bottom, and I'm going to use every single team that is currently in the SEC. Number 14, last place. If you guessed Vanderbilt, you're correct. From 1980 to 2020, Vanderbilt was 154 and 308. That is a winning percentage of 33.3%, meaning they win exactly 1/3 of their games. That is terrible. That is bad. So what specific decades contributed to that? Well, they had a bad 80s. They were 33 and 77. They had a bad 90s. They were 34 and 76. They had a bad 2000s. They were 34 and 83. And yes, they had a bad 2010s. 53 and 72. A little bit better, but still bad. Right above Ole Miss, 13th place, second to last, Old Kentucky. Final record between 1980 and 2020, 198 and 269. That's a winning percentage of 42.4%. What contributed to that? 4 bad decades, basically. They had a bad 80s, 47 and 62, a bad 90s, 44 and 69, bad 2000s, 50 and 70, and yes, a bad 2010s, 57 and 68. They've had a rough 4 decades. 12th place between 1980 and 2020 belongs to Ole Miss, and they could be higher, but they had to vacate 33 wins. Final record, 206 and 230 between 1980 and 2020. That is a winning percentage of 47.25%. They had a bad 80s, 49 and 60, and a bad-ish 2000s, 63 and 58. But it was the 2010s that really got them, 27 and 64, and it was because of those vacated wins. Had they not had to vacate those wins, they would actually be above 500, 236 and 230. That's a winning percentage of 50.64%, and it would have put them above their arch rival, Mississippi State. So, thank you, Freeze, for being under Mississippi State in winning percentage between 1980 and 2020, because now the Bulldogs have bragging rights for the past 40 years. Number 11 on the list. This is where things start to get a little bit better for the SEC. Mississippi State. Overall, they are 235 and 239. Still not over 500. That's a winning percentage of 49.58%. But really only 2 bad decades. They had a bad 80s, 50 and 62, and a bad 2000s, 42 and 76. Number 10, Missouri. Overall record, 234 and 237. Still not quite over 50%. That's 49.68%. They had a bad 80s, 45 and 64, and a bad 90s, 43 and 67. After that, they're starting to get better. If they have another decade of a little bit of success, they can get that winning percentage over 500 from 1980 up until now. Number 9 on the list, the first team with a winning percentage over 500 since 1980, South Carolina. They are 251 and 220. That's a winning percentage of 53.29%. They did have a bad-ish 80s, 63 and 49. That's still above 500, but the 90s is what killed them. 42 and 66, including one year where they went over. Didn't win a single game that season. I remember that. Brad Scott was their coach. Number 8 on this list, Arkansas. From 1980 to 2020, they were 269 and 211. 67. That's a winning percentage of 56.04%. Okay, we're getting there. They had a bad 90s, 55 and 58, and a bad 2000s, 58 and 67. They are doing better, but still not all that great. Number 7, this is where we make a little bit of a jump. Texas A&M, from 1980 to 2020, they were 312 and 177. That's not bad. That's a winning percentage of 63.8%. What happened? Well, they had a bad-ish 2000s. They were 63 and 59, but other than that, they've had a pretty good 4 decades. Number 6 on this list, Tennessee. They are 322 and 165 from 1980 to 2020. That's a winning percentage of 66.11%. The problem with Tennessee, they've been recently bad. They actually had a good 80s, a good 90s, and a good 2000s. It was the 2010s that got them. They were 63 and 62 in that decade. That's only one game over 500. Yeah, people are getting used to this new trash Tennessee. It's been a while since they've been good. Now we're in the top 5. Number 5, LSU. 326 and 158 from 1980 to 2020. That is a winning percentage of 67.36%. And the only thing that got them was a bad 90s. They were 54 and 58. Not a good 90s for LSU. Number 4 on this list, Auburn. They are 333 and 155. That's 68.44% between 1980 and 2020. Not really any bad decades. They were top 50 in winning percentage in each decade. Number 3 on the list. This is the one that might surprise you. Alabama. They are 350 and 135. That's a winning percentage of 72.16% over the past 4 decades, from 1980 to 2020. They didn't have any bad decades. It's just 2 other teams had monster decades, and Alabama is working on that right now. Give it another decade, Alabama will definitely be number 1 since 1980. Number 2 on this list, Georgia. They are 358 and 137 from 1980, and they won their national championship, to 2020. Winning percentage of 72.32%. Now you know why I carried it out to the hundreds, because it got tight at the top. That leaves the number 1 spot, and that's going to be Florida. 359 and 135. That's a winning percentage of 72.53%. So it was super close at the top, but Florida edges everybody out. They've had the most success from 1980 to 2020. Like I said, give it another decade, Bama will squash everybody. But right now, it's close, guys. It is very close. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.